Would it be that crazy if a photographer like me would manage to DIY a light? Well, it's DIY, and that was not planned. So, would it be that crazy if I managed to DIY a light that's better than products already available on the market? Well, that's exactly what I'm trying to find out. This is my first prototype, and this is episode 2. Roll the intro. In the first episode, we discussed the way I power this panel, and today I want to talk about the actual LEDs. But first, let me tell you why I started this entire project around a year ago. This was the only RGB light that I had back then, and it was really frustrating because when you set a light like this from older generation to stuff like pure red, it actually gives you pure red light. And pure red light, when on a digital sensor, like the one that I'm filming on right now, means that I'm gonna lose a ton of details if all I have is pure red light. This means that I'm only going to excite the red subpixel in this area over here. So I'm basically losing 3/4 of my resolution when I don't give the sensor any other light but red. This happens because the subpixels of our cameras, like in the sensor, are red, green, and blue. We have 2 green ones, so that makes a total of 4, but that's beyond the scope of this video. Our RGB lights also have 3 subpixels in any RGB LED. Again, red, green, or blue. So if I'm emitting pure red light from this lamp, only the red subpixels in the sensor of my camera will actually receive some light. And in the meanwhile, the blue and green channels are completely dead. No information there. And this actually has a super simple fix. In the light settings, instead of emitting pure red, like this, we can go and set it to a bit of orange and also reduce the saturation by a few percent. And if I tone it down a bit, you can already see that even though I'm getting red light off my face, I'm not getting completely blown out reds that are clipping and losing me a ton of information. And the same thing does apply for pure green or pure blue. But I'm trying to keep it simple. So the general thinking is that you should avoid using pure red, green, or blue, set at 100% saturation, because that way you are losing a lot of information. It's much better if your LED is actually emitting out of all of the 3 channels, so your sensor has a bit more data to work with. That's the easy way to avoid this problem. But I started looking for individually addressable LEDs. My thinking is that if I want this pixel to be fully red, I can set the neighboring ones to be a bit magenta or a bit orange, and this way I'll get a smoother gradient around it while still getting pretty saturated red light. And guess what? It's not even that hard to achieve that with a DIY panel like this one. Like right now I have it set to create this pattern. Half of it is green so you can see it better, but if instead of that I set it to a bit of orange, the pattern is now barely visible, but if I'm using it to illuminate myself, you can see that I'm not clipping the red channel and I'm not losing that much resolution as I was before. Oh, and of course, in this room right now, there are some other lights on, so the problem is not that accentuated. But if all I have is one really powerful red light, it's gonna be way more apparent. And even when using my DIY panel, there is still another problem. This right here only has RGB LEDs, no white light whatsoever, so we can't really talk about CRI. Yes, we can get white light out of this panel by turning on the red, green and blue cells at the same time, but that light is trash quality. And this tube right here has the same problem. When I'm lowering the saturation on it, instead of using the white light LEDs to mix in with the red light, it's actually using the green and the blue cells in the RGB LEDs, and that's another can of worms. I mean, at this moment, would you say that this is a red light? Because the thing is that it's actually supposed to be red. You see, the hue is set to 0 and that means pure red. But because I have the saturation set to 97% and the intensity is so low, this is setting the power of the red LED to 1%. And the other 2 ones are supposed to be to 97% out of that. But it doesn't know how to do that. So I'm ending up with this white magenta looking light. I don't even know if the blue and green LEDs are actually overpowering the red or what's happening here, but the truth is that this bar is only using the RGB LEDs at the moment, and that's not the way you want your lights to operate. So if the first lesson in this video was that we don't really want to shoot at 100% saturation with red, blue or green in our photography, the second one is that we want lights that are able to do what this pocketable light from Ulanzi does. This one is using the white light LEDs to desaturate the RGB LEDs when you're pulling down the saturation on the RGB mode. So the whole thing is basically math between the power of different LEDs. You want the RGB LED to keep emitting just pure red and mix it with the white light coming from the normal CCT LEDs in order to desaturate that. And if you want to lower the power, you lower both of the powers at the same time. That's how it works behind with some logic or some programming. And as a photographer, you don't need to know how to program that. But what you need to keep in mind is that it's preferable to buy a light that can actually desaturate colors using the CCT LED or the white light LED instead of relying only on the RGB LED the way my DIY panel over here does. This is producing really low CRI light when I'm desaturating any color. So one of the conclusion of today's video is that my first prototype at a DIY light is really bad at producing colors that are not very saturated. That, of course, if I'm using it on itself. If I mix it with some other higher CRI light, that's not that big of a problem. But let's go back to the type of LEDs that are available on the market because there are a few more news that I want to mention in this video. First of all, I've heard about RGBW LEDs. Those are LEDs that have red, green, blue, and a white cell all encapsulated in a single chip. And even RGBWW, which have two white light LEDs, one for warm light and one for cold light. Through my research, I figured that they are probably really low CRI as well, but I want to give that a try and see how that behaves in a photographic situation. Most probably not going to be ideal for a photography lamp, but it's going to be an interesting project and I'm probably going to make an episode about it as well. Secondly, Aperture has recently come out with their Blare system, and that stands for blue, lime, amber, indigo, and red. More channels, and they are claiming that they can get a more accurate representation of light on a spectrogram, but since I don't have a spectrometer, I can't verify that, and of course, the light is something like $600, nothing close to my 20 something dollars DIY project. So sounds really cool, and if you're nerding out about photography lights, you should probably check that out. I haven't seen any LED chip that individually has all these channels, so I can't really DIY anything like that for the moment. And with that out of the way, I have three conclusions for today. First of all, when shooting with RGB lights, try and avoid pure red, green, or blue at 100% saturation. That's gonna create problems down the line, and you don't wanna deal with that when editing your photos. Secondly, when buying an RGB LED light, try and look for lights that have white light LEDs and are using them to desaturate the color of the RGB ones. That's gonna create higher CRI light in the end, and you're gonna be thanking me when you edit your photos. And finally, for my project and my DIY prototypes, I like them, but these aren't going to be the solution for my perfect or ideal light. So I'm gonna be looking for RGBW strips and try to DIY something out of that in a future episode. But until then, I'll see you in the next video.